Hi, I'm Abdul Saad, clinical psychologist here at Vital Mind Psychology in Sydney, Australia. You can check me out at vitalmind.com.au, where you can learn more about my approach and the services I offer, including coaching to international clients. And you can also check me out on Facebook. Just search for Vital Mind Psychology. So I'm sitting down today. I'm not making use of the whiteboard because there's quite a bit of material to go through. And today I will be discussing what I think is a much anticipated video, which is understanding covert narcissism or understanding the covert narcissist. Now, the first thing I want to say is to understand that the actual term covert narcissist can be problematic and can create a hindrance, a barrier to understanding this variant of narcissism. So again, this has been confirmed in the psychological literature in clinical practice that there are, broadly speaking, two variants or two forms of pathological narcissism: the overt or grandiose, which I've spoken about in the previous couple of videos, and the covert form of narcissism. Now, the term covert is, as I said, can create difficulties because the word covert, which means hidden, can for many people denote or imply that this is a person who is consciously hiding their narcissism, that they're trying to trick us. And although there can be a grain of truth to that, the way that I view it, and this is me giving my perspective, my opinion based on my clinical experience, based on my reading of the literature, the way that I view it is that it's not so much that this person is hiding their narcissism in an instrumental way, in that, you know, they're consciously hiding it. It's more the case that this is an individual who has a particular personality structure that doesn't easily facilitate the expression of their narcissism in a more overt, grandiose, superior manner. So we're not dealing here with an individual that is by temperament extroverted and exhibitionistic. So the narcissism is hidden, in my opinion, owing more to the personality structure rather than a conscious choice to hide the narcissism. That's an important point that I want to make at the outset. The other very important point is that when we are dealing with the topic of covert narcissism, when we are discussing it, when we are dealing with it in clinical practice, when you are dealing with it in your relationships, we have to give these individuals, I'm going to use the word the respect that their sensitivity deserves, not because they are deserving of respect, but because if we do not give that respect, and if we do not appreciate how profoundly destructive these individuals can be, we can often, or empaths can often, individuals can often create a lot of trouble for themselves. So we are entering into a personality structure here which requires an incredibly high amount of sensitivity, a high amount of understanding and attunement. Otherwise we can very quickly get ourselves into trouble. And I want people to be aware of that when they make comments on this video. I love comments, I appreciate comments, tell me about your experiences. But what I would say, and I know that this is dragging on already into 4 minutes, is that if you are going to reflect on your experience, when your username is your full name, and then you're saying my husband, my sister, and it's your full name, that's an identifier that is crossing a boundary there, and I do quickly do my best to delete those comments. So don't give information that identifies you. Speak more in abstract, or my coworker, my colleague, my partner. But if the username is your full name, that's when I will delete the comments, because it's just not worth it from my end to go down that path where people are using the comment section as a way to vent. We want to use the comment section as a way to educate each other, shed light, but not to just furiously vent. So please be aware of that when you comment on this video. Let's keep this educational, academic, let's keep this tactful, and let's not make this about unleashing rage upon people, even though they may have hurt us in our lives. Okay, covert narcissism. Let's get started. Various names. I've already explained why the label covert can be problematic. There are other labels: vulnerable narcissism, hypersensitive narcissism, shy narcissism. Okay, so let's look at it in terms of the 4 domains that I did for the grandiose narcissist. Number 1, the relation to self. Number 2, the relation to others. Number 3, the dominant emotions that rule this person's internal mental life. And number 4, the relation to the self. First of all, relation to, number 4 is the temperament, sorry. So number 1, relation to self. What we see with covert narcissism is the oscillation, the movement between grandiosity, grandiose inflation, and feelings of inferiority. So the key distinction we see here is, in contrast to the grandiose narcissist, the vulnerable narcissist is much more painfully self-aware. The covert narcissist is much more painfully self-aware, and they can still have access to their underlying feelings of shame and inferiority. And that's why we see an oscillation between grandiosity and inferiority, between inflation and deflation in the same individual. Whereas for the grandiose narcissist, at the level of a personality disorder, they've become completely cut off from their vulnerability and their shame. They have become shameless. Now, the grandiosity of the covert narcissist manifests in a more subtle way, which is why this is a difficult disorder or variant of the personality disorder to conceptualize, to write about, and to speak about, because the grandiosity fundamentally manifests in how self-referencing this individual is. It is all about them, their thoughts, their feelings, their sensitivities, their opinions. This is an individual that is incredibly self-referencing, and this self-referencing nature makes an individual with covert narcissism painfully sensitive to criticism. And this is what actually can make these individuals, I use the word dangerous or unhinged, when they become extremely pathological because of their painful experience of self. So they're highly self-referencing, and the grandiosity also manifests in terms of how hypersensitive to criticism they are. These are people that are extremely hypervigilant to insult, to feeling slighted. And you might think, well, how is that grandiose? Well, it's grandiose because, as I said, they're so self-referencing. Everything relates back to them. They can very easily find a way to construe something as a criticism, as a put down, etc. The other point I want to make about the grandiosity of the covert narcissist, which hides their grandiosity, is that the grandiosity of the covert narcissist is what I call, it's constructed in the negative. Whereas the grandiosity of the overt, charming narcissist is constructed in the positive. So what they are, they're selling themselves, they're marketing themselves. Hey, this is what I am. It's flashy, it's colorful, it's exuberant. Whereas the grandiosity of the covert narcissist is constructed in the negative. It's hidden, it's latent, it's unfulfilled. It's largely about what could have been, what I could have accomplished if I was more well known, if people appreciated me, if people gave me the reverence that I deserve. So there's a real focus here on the perception of their specialness, which at some level has not been fully fulfilled. And therefore I say, with covert narcissism, we have a grandiosity that is constructed in the negative. And this means that covert narcissists aren't really winners in the sense of the term that we understand in modern, capitalist society. These people aren't really movers and shakers like grandiose narcissists. They're painfully self-aware. Their grandiosity is hidden. They're incredibly sensitive to insult. So it means that these are not people who can rapidly ascend hierarchies. These aren't people who experience themselves as winners in any typical or prototypical sense. So this creates a problem for them. How do they bridge the gap between their idealized grandiose self, which is latent and they feel is unfulfilled because it's been blocked through unfairness, injustice, impediments, people? How do they bridge the gap between that idealized grandiose self and the reality of their lives, which is often not very flattering, because this individual's neuroticism and painful shyness and self-awareness inhibits their ability to perform, to be a winner. And the way that they bridge the gap is by obsessively focusing on what is blocking their greatness being actualized, and by becoming very angry and resentful at those factors or people or situations that they feel is blocking their greatness. So this is a person who has an incredibly deep capacity for resentment and for anger that is hidden. I'm going to get into that in the second part. Now, when it comes to their inferiority, it is much more easily triggered compared to the grandiose narcissist, because the key difference here is that a grandiose narcissist makes what's called downward social comparisons. They look down at people. I'm better than you. And because they are winners, they will surround themselves with people who confirm their greatness. So they're the leaders, they're the charmers, they've got the most money, etc. Whereas with a covert narcissist, their personality doesn't have the ingredients there. They don't have the extroversion, they're highly neurotic, they're painfully shy, they've got the hidden grandiosity. So they're inferior, and so therefore they make what's called upward social comparisons. So they're painfully aware of anyone that's higher in the dominance hierarchy than them. And this triggers painful feelings of envy for this individual and feelings of resentment. So this is a person that is much more vulnerable to feelings of envy and those feelings festering into hatred and contempt, compared to a grandiose narcissist who has a much firmer sort of base by which to judge themselves, and they can just very more easily dismiss people, whereas this is a brooder. This is someone that really ruminates and festers upon perceived slights, people that they perceive have more accolades than them, have more power than them, are more brilliant than them, and this triggers their painful feelings of inferiority. So we have an individual that is complex, and this is why we need more time in discussing these people. They're riddled with insecurities, shame and doubt. They're painfully self-aware, yet there is this hidden grandiosity where they're highly self-referencing, they're hypersensitive to criticism, and they have this hidden, latent, or sense of unfulfilled grandiosity. So there's a strong streak of injustice, of pain, of suffering, of an individual who feels unique and who feels that there are so many impediments to their uniqueness reaching its full fruition. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how the covert narcissist, the hypersensitive narcissist, the vulnerable narcissist experiences themselves. Moving on to how they relate to others. Now, this is an individual who is not really capable of charm and seduction as a grandiose narcissist is, because, as I said, there isn't enough positivity there. This is a person that is highly negative. But the way that they might charm or seduce, if I can use that word, is by playing the victim card, gaining people's attention by gaining their sympathy. They can do this early on in romantic relationships with endless stories about how they were victimized, triggering a sense of empathy, triggering a sense of compassion from people. They present an image of themselves as humble, self-effacing, and meek. And this is what makes this particular variant of narcissism really tricky, because at the surface, the covert narcissist is incredibly aware of social norms and the need to adhere to social norms because they're so sensitive to criticism. They're incredibly sensitive to fear of negative evaluation. So they present with a high level of social conformity overtly, whereas covertly they resent the need to conform to social norms. And with covert narcissists, they will disregard social norms only when they're guaranteed anonymity, only when no one's looking. And that's when you'll see their aggression. I say that trolls are the quintessential covert narcissists. The internet is teeming with these people because of the anonymity, the ability to unleash their aggression and their hatred with the cloak of anonymity with zero consequences. So when people are looking, it's very difficult to see the covert narcissism because of the high focus on social norms and following the norms. When no one is looking, that's when you see their aggression, when they have the chance to act aggressive, to act in a way that is cruel and demeaning. Whereas with a grandiose narcissist, it's actually the opposite. They don't really care about the social norms. In fact, they're more likely to disregard social norms if you put pressure on them publicly. So no, I'm not having a bar of it. So how do covert narcissists dominate and exploit others? Well, they do this in two ways. Number one, I've mentioned, by playing on their image of meekness and humility and harmlessness. And they use this to acquire what they want without making the other person feel threatened. And number two, as I said, more overtly if no one is looking. When anonymity is guaranteed, the covert narcissist is capable of unleashing their full fury on their intended target, on the person or the individuals or the system or society who they believe has done them an injustice, who has not accepted their greatness or has blocked the fulfillment of their greatness. And when they're in this cruel mode, they can be condescending, cruel. They are masters of sarcasm and masters of backhanded compliments. These are individuals that are masters of the backhanded compliment, the veiled criticism that you sort of don't get. You have to really process it deeply to understand what just hit you with even a compliment they gave you. So you may have lost some weight, and an individual with this form of narcissism may say, I was really worried about your health. You know, I'm glad you lost the weight. But the intonation in which they say it puts the dig in, and you can sort of detect the covert aggression. They're incredibly envious. They're prone to envy, as I said, due to their personality structure, because they engage in upward social comparisons. And these are individuals that are highly unforgiving. They brood, they resent, they ruminate on perceived slights. They can be litigious. And here's another important contrast. I spoke about the grandiose narcissist wanting to ascend dominance hierarchies. Covert narcissists, and this might be the first time this information is revealed in a context like this, covert narcissists despise dominance hierarchies. Absolutely despise. Because hierarchies remind them of their inferiority, remind them that there are people at the bottom, there are people at the top, and they're not at the top. And we see in the increase, this is my opinion, in the increase in the movement of social justice warriors, I believe is a manifestation at a wider social level of covert narcissism afflicting large numbers of young people and millennials today with this hysteria around social justice and virtue signaling and on and on. So they despise dominance hierarchies. They seek to bring down dominance hierarchies. They seek to bring down those they perceive to be at the top of the hierarchies. Or the other thing a covert narcissist will do is they will embed themselves within a power structure, a hierarchy, but they're usually uncomfortable with being right at the top. So you'll find more of these people in middle management, in positions which give them some sort of power, bureaucratic positions where they can inflict punishment, where they can be cruel, where they can complicate people's lives. And this brings us to the third domain I want to talk about with covert narcissists, which is their dominant emotions. So what are the dominant emotions that rule this individual's mental life? And I'm just going to go through this list quickly. Shame, anxiety, especially at perceived flaws and fear of negative evaluation. There's a high degree of social anxiety that can operate in these individuals. Hatred, anger, contempt, envy, spite, disgust, and a really interesting emotion called I actually looked up how to pronounce this. Google said the pronouncement is Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude. It's a German term. I think here us Aussies would just say Schadenfreude. And that is taking pleasure or joy at someone else's misfortune. If we can get 2,000 likes on this video, if you think this is quality information, and share it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bonus video that will help you understand Schadenfreude in the Covert Narcissist. So never done that before, but if we can get 2,000 likes for this and really put this video out there, I will do a bonus video on the Covert Narcissist and Schadenfreude. But in the time I have now, it's limited. I'm already at 20 minutes. Okay, fourth area, their temperament. Again, we've sort of gone through this. Unlike the grandiose narcissist, this is a person who is high on neuroticism. In other words, they're more prone to experience obsessiveness, anxiety, depression, what psychologists would call negative affect. They're high on approach avoidance. These are not people that are social butterflies. They present a veneer of meekness, of humility. They're shy. They're often very softly spoken. But they're highly disagreeable by temperament, high disagreeableness, which again is covert. You're not really going to see that unless they're guaranteed not being exposed. And they're low dominance. These are not highly dominant people, again, unless they're guaranteed anonymity and protection from social scrutiny, which is what we see in the phenomenon of trolling online. So I hope I've done justice to an introduction to covert narcissism across four important domains: the relation to the self, the relation to others, the dominant emotions that rule the person's internal mental life, and number four, their temperament. What I will be doing in the next video is looking at the 3 levels of covert narcissism. And if we can get those likes, again, first time I'm doing this, but hey, let's give it a go. I will be doing a bonus video on the covert narcissist and Schadenfreude, or the pleasure and joy that they derive at other people's misfortunes. And in that video, I will reveal what are the things that you don't want to do to invite that into your life. I'll leave it there. I look forward to seeing you next week with the video on the 3 levels of covert narcissism. God willing, you take care of yourselves. I look forward to reading your comments. All the very best. Take care. Bye-bye.